So what are scales? Well, scales are to music what the alphabet is to language. Are the building blocks of music, allowing you to play melodies and improvise over chords. Now, talking about improvisation, do you remember this? Oh my goodness. Did you see that? Well, guess what? That's improvisation. An improvisation over chords. Absolutely amazing, right? And you know what? It's mastering scales that allows you to play like that. Now let's start you on your journey to becoming as great as Corey is. Okay, so in this lesson, we'll look at 3 types of scales: chromatic, major, and minor. We'll also look at ways to master them. And this is critical because mastery is what allows you to play really well. Now, the chromatic scale, this uses all the notes on the keyboard. So first, let's make sure we know all the notes on the keyboard. Alright, so we're going to look at the notes on the keyboard. We dealt with them before, episode 1 and a few other episodes. We looked at what they're called, the musical alphabet and things like that. We're just going to recap quickly in this session and just refresh our minds so that we can really understand the scales, because you have to know the notes in order to learn the scales. Alright, so you must remember that C is to the left of 2 black notes. This is very important. And it's always the case, right to the left of 2 black notes, that's your C. And you should also remember that F is to the left of 3 black notes. Okay, you know the musical alphabet. We did it before. It's starting with C. We can say C here, and you can continue C, and then move on to the next note, which would be D, and then E, and then F. Alright? Now after F, you got G. Once you get to G, you know you start again at A. So G, A, B, and C. Okay? Okay, great. Now it's time to take a 5-minute practice exercise. Take a look at exercise 1 below this video. Pause the video now and do this exercise. Try to match the notes. Do that now. Okay, so what about the black notes, you may ask? Introducing enharmonics. Now the interesting thing is, what happens with the black notes? Now you might remember in one of the videos you would have heard me say C sharp, and in another video you heard me say D flat. How is it that the same note has both C sharp and D flat? Let's take a closer look at this. One note having 2 names, for example C sharp or D flat. This is called enharmonics. This principle is based on what's happening depending on which note you're coming from. If we're going up, which is to the right, C, we say we raise C or sharpen C, by a half step. You do remember the half steps, yes? So half step up, raise it a half step, or sharpen C a half step, which makes it easy if you say sharpen. And that's how we get C sharp. Okay? So with these notes, when you're going up, the flat note above the note becomes the sharp when you're going up. Same thing here for F. F is a natural note on the white key. And when you go up, or you raise it a half step, or you sharpen it a half step, you see you got your F sharp. Okay? Now when you're coming down, it's the opposite, and it's flattened. So sharpen to go up, and flatten to come down. So if I was coming down from the G instead, this is G, this now becomes G flat. Same thing here, instead of C sharp, if I'm coming down from the D, I now have D flat. And the same thing applies to everything. Coming down from the E is E flat, going up it will be D sharp, and so on. Now, all you need to focus on is the fact that these black notes represent sharps and flats. That's it. When it comes to the actual keys, because you can play a major scale on any key, remember we did it in C, I can go to any of these notes. For example, I can go to this E flat and play a major scale. See? Now, what's important to know is that you have to learn them all, but don't try to learn them all in one session. We're going to do it step by step, so you don't have to worry. Alright, so now it's time for another 5-minute practice exercise, exercise 2. Pause the video now and check it out. It's just below exercise 1, below this video. Pause the video and do exercise 2. This will help you with your flats and sharps. Alright, so we're looking at the chromatic scale and what it is and how to play it. Okay, so we're looking at the chromatic scale. And we said it uses all the notes, whether they're black or white. Okay, that's all the notes starting on C and ending on C, and I've played all the notes, black and white. That would be an example of the chromatic scale. It's also called the scale of color. Okay, so the chromatic scale allows you to play all the notes, and it really adds interest when you're playing solo lines and so on, because these additional notes give you additional color. And as we progress through the course, you'll see that it's really powerful to learn these additional inside notes, the passing notes they're also called when you use the chromatic scale. So let's look at something. What is cool about the chromatic scale is that there is a fingering to play it that actually is transferable across all the keys. Because once you have the basic fundamental of it, you'll be able to play it easily from any key. Now, this is what the basic pattern is. There's two main things you want to remember. We use 3 fingers in particular. We use the thumb, the index, and the middle finger. Those 3 fingers will allow you to play the chromatic scale starting on any note. I can start on B. That's me starting on B. I can start on B flat, right? You know, I can start on the A. So the question is, what's the actual fingering rule? So the rule is, we first want to know the 3 fingers we'll be using is the thumb, the index, and the middle. Okay, those are the three fingers. What is interesting though is that we'll be going, every time there's a black note to be played, we use the middle finger on that black note. Now you'd notice there's a gap here in between the group of 3 black notes and the group of 2 black notes. Same thing up here, in between this group of 2 black notes and this group of 3 black notes. Now, the second rule you want to remember is that anytime you're crossing in between the 2 groupings, whether it's a group of 2 to 3 or coming back down 3 to 2, and that's across the entire keyboard, you use all 3 fingers, and I'll show you how. Once you enter, let's say we're going to go from B up to that black note, which is D flat, C sharp, same thing. What we'll do, it will be thumb on B, index on C, and then middle plays that D flat. What you want to think about is the fact that anytime you have 2 white notes together, you use your thumb and your index on them. So that applies anywhere there's 2 white notes together without a black note in between. You remember those crossing points we did in the key of C major scale, where you have B to C and E to F. Those places, anywhere the 2 white notes come together without a black note in between, that's when you'll use your thumb and your index finger to play them. That's like a crossing for the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale will need to be crossed slightly uniquely or differently every time you get to 2 white notes that are a semitone apart or a half step apart with no black note in between. So let me go slowly and show you. Let's say I started on this F. We have to apply the first rule, which is thumb and middle finger going between black and white. Once you got the black note, you use middle finger on the black note only. So I'll start with my thumb, because the white notes are played with the thumb normally, and the black notes are played with the middle. So I'll go thumb on that F, middle on that G flat, I'll go thumb on that G, middle on that A flat, thumb on that A, middle on that B flat. Then look at this, thumb on that B, and now because I've come to that place where I've got the 2 white notes together, which is a half step because there's no black note, I now employ or utilize both my thumb and my index. Thumb on B, index on C, then I go back to the middle on the black note, which is that D flat, then I go back to my thumb, then middle on the black note, then back to the thumb on the white. But here we have another half step crossing between one white note to the next without the black note. So that's where I use my thumb and my index. Alright, so now we're back to another black note, back to the middle. Thumb and middle. Thumb and middle. Thumb. Here's another crossing. And so what do I do here? What do I do? Do I use my middle or do I use my index? I use my index. Alright, because we're back to another half step crossing between B and C there. There's no black note in between. And that's how that would work. Okay, so really you can start anywhere. If you start in a black note, you start with the middle. And once you get to that half step between the 2 white notes, whether it's B to C or E to F, that's when you use thumb and index. And then you go back to thumb and middle for all the blacks. you see how that works? So you can try that slowly, and it will help you a lot, especially later on when we start doing improvisation. That chromatic scale comes in really handy. Alright, now it's time for a 5-minute activity break. Share everything you know now about the chromatic scale to 3 people. Now this is a critical step in your learning, so make sure you do it. Do that now. Tell 3 people exactly what you remember about the chromatic scale. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, now in terms of mastering the chromatic scale, you want to use the Holden technique and apply it to your crossings. So you want to break it up into groups, and then you want to hold each section with all the crossovers so that you can master them individually. That's one. You could do it at the BC crossing there with the middle on the black note above it, like that. On the D flat, they've got the middle on the D flat there. Or you can do it here with E, F, and that G flat, E, F, and G flat. Those are the 2 places you can practice holding. You don't need to do them both. In one practice session, you'll do one, 5 minutes, and then there's the other one, which would be a normal white note to a black note. You want to hold that for about 5 minutes as well. And then the one where the thumb is actually crossing under, yes, and you'll go the middle on the black note, and thumb on the white note just above it. So you can see that I've actually got my thumb slightly crossing under that middle, and my hand is kind of leaning a bit to the right. So the first one would be that group, right? The Holden technique for mastering this. Second one would be this group, and then the third one would be that group. Once you got those 3 positions, you're fine. Make sure you have the right fingering. Thumb index middle for the 2 whites and the black. Thumb on middle for the white to the black. And then middle to thumb for the black to the white. Okay? Once you've gotten those for about 5 minutes each, then you want to move on to start in any way you wish. You can start with the C, and you literally be going really slowly. Remembering the fingering. And I'll suggest you use the whole range of your keyboard when you're practicing this scale. Now, interestingly enough, you can also do it with the left hand. And it's the same fingering, but in a mirrored reverse. Like if you have a mirror in the middle of the 2 hands, you notice the hands are actually a mirror image of each other. So the 2 thumbs, it looks as if there's a mirror in the middle of the 2 hands. The 2 thumbs are closer, and the 2 little fingers are furthest away. Right? Whichever way you do it, it's a mirror image of the other hand. Really amazing creation. But here's the thing. You just do the reverse. You have the same principle of the thumb and index when you have the 2 whites together without the black in between. Yeah, these 2 places. And you can do the same thing with the Holden technique to master these. Just it's going to be the other way. Instead of going this way to the right as the right hand, going that way to the left for the left hand. And you'll also practice going, just choose, it could be on any black note and any white note. You want to have this shape also learned, which is thumb to middle for going down white to black, as well as middle to white. right? Because these are the two crossing points you'll meet once you're going through black to white formation. Once you've got these three down, so this is the first one, second one, third one, okay? And then you want to go slowly. Okay, and you want to go ascending and descending, which means going up and going down really slowly, making sure you build up the strength in the fingers. It's really important exercise. So that's a chromatic scale. We're going to move into how to apply it a lot more in later episodes and in season 2 and so on. But for now, really make sure you master this scale because it's very important. All right? All the best with that. Okay, it's time to take a physical break, stretch those legs, grab a bite to eat, and be back in 10 minutes. It's important that you take frequent breaks, get the blood flowing through your spine and get the blood flowing through your body. But yeah, take a break now and be back in 10 minutes. Talk to you soon. The major scale. This has a whole step, half step pattern. 2 whole steps, 1 half step, followed by 3 whole steps, and then 1 half step. You must remember that from a previous episode, don't you? In this training, we'll be looking at scale mastery. Pay close attention. This is very important. Okay, so what do we mean when we talk about the actual scale mastery? Scale mastery has to do with being able to play the scale smoothly and that applies to both hands. With that amount of dexterity and agility in your hand, you can do many different things. It makes it interesting to actually play because you have the speed and agility that's required. So this is the first step. But the crossing of the fingers is where most beginning students get tied up. So we're going to help you with that with a system that allow you to iron out those bumps so you don't sound like it's kind of like you want it to be smooth, not choppy. Now the psychology behind this is that you can't actually learn to play smoothly like that unless you first learn to play them really slowly, because the brain works that way. Take it in slow and then the brain can give it back to you at any speed you wish. And you won't even need to think about it. So, we looked at C major scale before, and in the previous season and earlier in this video we looked at the crossing when we dealt with the chromatic scale. The point is, you want to work on the crossings and you want to play the whole scale really slowly. So I'm going to go through all the major scales, left hand and right hand, and show you where you need to use the holding technique and where you need to use the crossing points for the holding technique as well. So let's start with C. You want to press the first 3 notes down. You hold that for 5 minutes. Then you want to press between the E and the F, because that's your first crossover point. Okay? Then you want to go all those 5 at once. Now, in order to do 2 scales, you probably would need to see that there's also another crossing between the B and the C, and your ring finger has to cross there to the C. So that will be your next group to hold. Okay, now that's one approach. If you really want to go all out, the next approach would be to go just practice the crossings. So you hold that for 5 minutes, and then you hold that one for 5 minutes. The first one is between the middle and the thumb, E and F. Okay. And then the second one will be between the ring finger and the thumb, B and C. And then you just go about playing the scale really slowly. And 5 minutes in each case. 5 minutes for the holding for each one, and then 5 minutes playing really slowly. See how that went? And I'm keeping an even timing between the crossings. That's very important. That's why you do it slowly, so you can control the muscles. Now, the other thing is you want to do it both going up and coming back down. When you get up to the top, don't stop. When you get up, come back down straight away. You also want to remember the rotation. There's a slight rotation this way where you're kind of rocking left to right as if opening a doorknob. Remember we spoke about the doorknob technique? We'll go through the practice routine in much more detail later, but for now, that's how you'll do that. Slight rotation. Slight rotation. Alright? Always slightly rotate the first of the 2 fingers when you're doing a crossing. Hey, now it's time to take a 5-minute activity break and actually try this on your own. Do a quick trial of the holding technique on your own with the right hand, holding for 1 minute instead of 5, so it goes a bit quicker. Each group and each crossing. If you need to rewind the video to make sure you got them right, please do that. But when you finish holding, try playing it up and down at least 5 times really slowly. Just the right hand. Give it your best shot. All the best with that. The left hand is very similar, but opposite, as we spoke about the mirror effect. that would be your first crossing. Thumb on G and middle on A. So you'd hold these for 5 minutes. Right? The next one would be when you get up here to the D. See that? That's the ring finger coming over. So you want to practice that crossover. Thumb on C and ring on D together. And you hold for 5 minutes. You then play the left hand scale up and down really slowly like you did with the right hand. Okay, so to play the left hand C major scale slowly, you'd want to go at this tempo, this speed. That's what tempo means, speed. You see that? And essentially you want to really focus on keeping the rest of your hand or your remaining fingers gently resting on the keyboard while the finger that's being played is pressed down. So when I'm pressing that F with my index finger, all the other fingers are gently, not pressing, but just gently resting on the keyboard. It's really important for building up the finger independence so you can play one finger at a time. You need to be able to develop that strength, and the scales help you with that. Hey, now it's time to take another 5-minute activity break and do a quick trial of the holding technique on your own, but this time use the left hand. And you remember the crossings we did, go back if you need to in the video as usual, and make sure you got the right fingers at the right positions, and practice both the groups and the finger crossings. And use 1 minute for now, just because we're doing it within the lesson. And then go ahead and play it slowly, and make sure you get the crossings right when you're playing slowly. Play it slowly about 5 times and enjoy it. All the best. Okay, now let's move on to a second scale, which would be F major. Let's go to F major. We know where F is, to the left of 3 black notes. And I'll just play it through so you can hear how it sounds. Okay, you'd notice that we're now using 1 black note, which is B flat. Okay, now remember we had the formula for the major scale, which is 2 whole steps, so that would be 1. Second one, you start where you stop, so that's 2 whole steps. 2 whole steps, we just skip these 2, and then you want a half step. That's why we go to the B flat there. There's always a half step between the 3rd and 4th notes of the major scale, and between the 7th and 8th notes of the major scale. Okay? So, let's look at this again in terms of the crossover points. The first 5 notes just continues from the little finger to the thumb. Now it would help if you actually pressed all 5 notes down just to get your fingers used to the shape. Because you see that index finger is slightly above all the others when they're all pressed down. And it's good to get used to that shape. So you probably want to do the first technique, which is to use the holding technique on not just the crossings, but also the groupings. I'll suggest you do that for all the other scales from now on. So this is the first group, okay, and it's little, ring, middle, index, thumb, okay, for F, G, A, B flat, and C. So it's the first group. It's the first group. Second place you want to use the holding technique is the crossover. That's the first crossover you'll meet, which is from C to D. So that's going to be held for 5 minutes. You do the same thing for the group as you do for the crossings. That's 5 minutes. And when you're doing your crossing and you're holding it, try and keep the next finger pretty much aligned with the next note it will play. So that will be E in this case. So that your entire hand is being conditioned with the overall shape. Then you've got a 3-note pattern here for the upper group, which completes the first octave of the F major scale. Okay? Then you get to the second crossover if you're doing 2 octaves, which is between F and G. And you're using your thumb on the F and your ring finger on the G. So the ring finger comes over the thumb when you're going up. You hold that for 5 minutes. Each of these holding positions you hold for 5 minutes. Okay? You've already covered the next section because it's been covered down here already in that first group. And you've already covered the second crossing. So now you can literally move on to playing the scale really slowly, at least 2 beats per note. So play it, not faster than that. You never play faster than that when you're just learning a new passage. Okay? Alright, now it's time to actually try out that left hand pattern on the F major scale. Really go in and try doing it slowly with the holding technique on the turns, on the crossings, on the groupings, and then play it slowly about 5 times. Take another 5 minutes and do this activity break and come back to the video when you're done. Now let's try the right hand. That's so you know what it sounds like. Let me just show you how it's played. Okay, now you'd notice that the actual fingering is slightly different. It's based on the shape. You go 1, 2, 3, 4. The first four notes of the major scale. Then you cross. So let's work on the groupings. The first grouping would be from F to B flat. Thumb on F, index on G, middle on A, and ring finger on B flat. All together. So that's the first group you hold for 5 minutes. And then you want to go to the first crossing, B flat to C. Ring finger on B flat, and that thumb crosses under to that C. Hold for 5 minutes. The next group you'll do is C, D, E, thumb, index, middle. That's 5 minutes as well. And then the next move will be to do the holding technique on the second crossing, which is from E to F, and it's actually the middle on the E and the thumb plays the F. And remember that the thumb is crossing under the middle finger so that it gets used to and facilitates that crossing. When you get really comfortable, you'll be able to play it fast. But remember, we start off really slowly and try and go the whole range of the keyboard if you can. Okay? Hey, it's that time again. Take another 5 minutes and this time work on the right hand F major scale. You've seen the crossings, you've seen the groupings. Do them 1 minute each and then take the last couple minutes and just play them through slowly at least 5 times. Okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to look at the minor scales. So we looked at 2 of the major scales. We're now going to look at minor scales. And this is very important that you understand this concept that I'm about to share with you, because it will have applications throughout your playing career. Now, this is how it works. Every major scale has what is called a relative minor scale, and I'll explain why in a minute. Another name for relative minor is natural minor, which simply means it flows naturally out of its related major scale. So the natural minor is related to a major scale, flows naturally out of it, and so it's also called the relative minor. So every minor scale, every natural minor scale has a relative major scale, and every major scale has a relative minor scale. Let's look at C. We know C goes like this. Remember some time ago in a previous episode, we said we're looking at these note names and we're replacing them with numbers. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're back at 1. Now, these numbers are very important for helping you understand relative major and relative minor. Simply put, the relative minor or natural minor of a major scale starts on the 6th degree or 6th note of the major scale and ends on the 6th degree or 6th note of the major scale. So let's have a look at this. That's the C major scale starting on the 1 and ending on the 1. If we were to check to see where the 6 was, do you know which note name it will be? Let's find out. C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, and look, A is 6. Now this is very important. The relative minor scale to the C major scale, remember every major scale has a relative minor, and vice versa. Every minor scale or relative minor scale or natural minor scale, same thing, has a relative major. It's just like the other way around. So we said it's the sixth note. In this case, in the key of C major, the sixth note is A. So we start the relative minor of C, which would be A natural minor, on A, because A is the sixth note of the C major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we started on A and we end on A. And all we do, we actually move through the C major scale, but we displace it. We sort of shift the starting place. So here we have it. As you can see it laid out in letters, it's a bit clearer to see without the notes on the keyboard. And you can see C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That A is where the shifting would have taken place. And translated over to numbers, look at the difference here. It's the same 6, but the 6 now becomes a 1, but 1 for the minor key. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, but in the relative minor or natural minor. So instead of starting on the 1 and ending on the 1, we start on the 6 and end on the 6. Pretty cool, right? So major scale, start on the 1, end on the 1. Natural minor or relative minor to that major scale. In other words, if it's C, it will be relative or natural to C. It's the sixth note, which is A. So all you need to do is find the sixth note. C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6. And all you do, you play the same C major scale, but this time you shift your starting place to create A natural minor, or A, the relative minor of C major. Let's check it out. And you hear that sound? It's a different sound from a major scale. If we played the same A as a major, listen to how it sounds. See, that's A major. But if you do A natural minor, or A, the relative minor of C major, listen to how it sounds. Now we're going to further detail with this in later sessions, but for now, all you need to know is I have a major scale, C. If I start on the 1 and end on the 1, that's the major scale in its normal fashion. If I want to create the relative minor to that C major scale, I find the sixth note. C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6. That's it. A is the starting point for that relative minor, that natural minor in A. And you literally play the same notes of the C major scale, but starting on A and ending on A. Starting on the sixth note and ending on the sixth note. Now let's look at how you'll actually play it in terms of the fingering. When you get to the C, you cross under the thumb to the D. If you're doing 1 octave, you just go straight out and you end on that A. But if you're doing 2 octaves, that's your first crossing from C to D, middle to thumb. Then when you go further, when you get to the G, you cross again and the thumb lands on the A. So the first one is between C and D with the middle and the thumb. respectively. So that's C with the middle and D with the thumb. And then the next one is at G and A. G with the ring, and A with the thumb. Okay? So let's try this in terms of how you practice it. You probably want to get that first group in, A, B, C, thumb, index, middle. Then you want to practice this by holding it, C to D, middle to D, C to D, middle on C, thumb on D. Then you want to get D, E, F, G, which is thumb, index, middle, and ring. That's another 5 minutes. And then finally, you want to get the ring to the thumb, G to A. Now, after about 2 weeks doing this type of training, you'll realize you need to spend less time on the crossovers and the groupings because you're starting to get a smooth, crossover. Okay? Now really give this your best because these scales are going to be the determining factors for how well you'll play later on. So don't try to skip over it. Make sure you give it your best. Now let's look at the left hand for the same A minor scale. Now, fingering, first 5 notes, A, B, C, D, and E. That's from little, ring, middle, index, and thumb. Okay? The first crossover between E and F. Thumb on E, middle on F. So that's where you hold that for 5 minutes. Next group is F, G, A with middle, index, and thumb. And then you really want to make sure you get in this A to B with thumb to the ring finger because this crossing tends to give a bit more trouble sometimes than the other one with the middle finger. Okay, so A to B, thumb on A, crossover with the ring finger to B, and you hold for 5 minutes. Once you do those 2, you should be able to play the entire scale in 2 octaves. You do it slowly. Yes, do that now. 5-minute break. That's when you want to jump on. Now, make sure that you take some time to work on that left hand, playing it slowly, that minor scale, up and down, do the holdings, do the crossings, we do. Play it slowly, because that's the only way you'll master it. Do that now. Okay, now let's think about this. We now want to be able to play the same minor scale concept for the other major scale that we learned, which was F major. Now, what was the rule? The rule was we actually have to go from the root, which is the 1, and find the 6th note. So let's check it out. F is 1, G is 2, A is 3, B flat is 4, C is 5, and D is the sixth note. So you see how the formula works? That sixth note will be the starting and ending point for the D relative minor scale, which is related to F major. How do we know? Because D is the sixth note of the F major scale. Okay? And it's also called what? Apart from relative. If you said natural, you're right. It's also the D natural minor, meaning D naturally coming out of the major scale that it's related to. How do you know? You ask yourself, what is D the sixth of? And D is actually the sixth of F. F is 1, G is 2, A is 3, B flat is 4, C is 5, and D is 6. So we know we start on that D. And now we're back to that D again. And that's how you create the natural minor on D. The D relative minor coming out of F major, because D is the sixth note of the F major scale. That's the rule. Once you find the sixth, you take the same major scale, but you start it on the sixth and end on the sixth. That's how you create the relative minor to a major scale. Now let's look at how we'll practice this in the left hand. Those are the first 5 notes. D with little finger, E with ring finger, F with middle finger, G with index finger, and A with the thumb. So you'd hold those 5 notes down for 5 minutes. The next position you want to learn with the holding technique is A to B flat. A with the thumb and middle on B flat. And you hold it there for 5 minutes. The next group would be B flat, C, and D. And those will be played with the middle, index, and thumb. You hold that in position so that your hand gets used to that shape, because that middle finger there is usually placed a little bit higher, seeing that it's on the B flat. So you want to make sure the fingers get used to these contours, like hills and valleys in a mountain terrain. Okay. Now the next critical point will be from D to E, where you cross from the thumb to the ring finger. That's for extending to 2 octaves. If we're just doing 1 octave, we'll stop with the thumb on D. But we want to continue. So to continue, so that it will be smooth, we have to do that crossing. So the thumb is on D, and the ring finger is on E. And you hold that for 5 minutes. Once you've completed these, you can then go on to playing it really slowly, 2 beats per note. Okay, excellent. Okay, take a 5-minute break now and go try that left hand on the D natural minor, D relative minor to F major that you just learned. Do the same thing. Do the holding for 1 minute each, and then go to the slow playing. Okay? Try that now. Now let's look at the right hand and how we'll actually play that for the 2-octave. Pattern. Now, we already know the notes, so let's just work it out. The first group you want to look at is D, E, F. And you'd use your thumb, index, and middle to play those. Then you want to work on a crossover, right? Middle on F and thumb on G, right? Making sure that the thumb is crossing under and the middle is crossing over. Then the next group you want to learn is G with the thumb, A with the index, B flat with the middle, and C with the ring. Very important that you do these groupings as well, because it helps with the shapes and the contours. In order to be able to play scales, you have to get used to the crossings. So, second crossing should be C to D, ring finger on C, and the thumb on D. And you hold for 5 minutes. Once you've completed them, this is group 1, this is the first crossing, this is group 2, this is the second crossing. Then once you've got that, you can go 2 beats per note. Okay, awesome. Now I would suggest that when you play and practice these, when you're playing it slowly, for all the major and minor scales, that you sing along by singing the numbers. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 again for the second octave. Okay? All the best with that. Hope that really helps.